Welcome back. So before we continue, I want to have a quick look at the architecture that I'm trying to build right here. And I know I kind of talked about it in the beginning, but that wasn't very code specific. It was more an overview. Now we're going to try and really dive into why my tests start taking the form, because I'm going to try and show you the diagram right here on how everything talks together, right? And let's just start out with having a look at this diagram I built. So first of all, we have the UI where we're going to end up with a web API. Let's just put that aside for now. We have an infrastructure where we put in like the repository implementation. That's pretty much where the repository is a pattern that kind of stores data somehow for me. Like in a data source, it could be a text file, it could be a database, it could be a relational or even a document database. That depends on the system. It could also be a place where I have mail implementation, printer implementation, stuff like that. So the infrastructure, we'll get back to that later. It's not part of what we're coding right now because we're still focusing on the core, right? Then we have the test. That's what we already worked in. And if you notice, running the test that we did last lesson is actually ended up having these lines. So let's just have a look at the lines. First of all, I kind of came to the first point that I needed an iLocation service, right? And notice there's a line right here from the test to the iLocation service, which is inside the interfaces for the primary driver ports. What does that mean? Let's try and jump into the code. Have a look at the Explorer right here. And notice we have the primary driver ports, and here we have our iLocation service, right? So that was kind of the first thing that we did. We kind of needed that service, so that was part of the plumbing to create our first location service interface in here. And then we also needed the reference for that guy, so that was why we created that reference. Step 2, the implementation. We needed to have a service implementation that kind of implemented that interface, and we needed a dependency for that. So a few things happened. First of all, we needed a relation or reference, between these two. So if you guys remember, we went in and we right-clicked and we said, well, in order to do this, we need a relation. So we added a reference, added that relation right there, right? And again, you can see that in the diagram now that we have a relation right here. The second thing I did was I had to have a relation from the test environment to this guy. And again, if you guys remember, we did the same thing for the test down here. We added a new reference and then we added it for the adapter right here for the driver. Okay, so let's go back. And then we needed the final one, which was all the way over here, the interfaces for the infrastructure. We needed a reference for that guy as well. So we added that reference for the test, and also the reference was added because we needed to have it in the constructor. Okay, so that's kind of, right now I'm just trying to explain the architecture and why these references kind of popped up, why we did the testing. Okay, this isn't really the production code yet, but it's like the plumbing for the production code that we're building. We're adding the references between the projects, and we're adding the interfaces that we need to kind of have specifications and contracts about how, for instance, the services will be when we implement them, how the repositories will be when we implement them, and later on, if we want to add printer stuff, mailing stuff, I don't know, security stuff, we might have interface for that as well. So I just want to kind of give you guys an overview about that to get started with actually working with this setup right here. So that was kind of a quick overview of the core, and we'll try and dive into these when we start actually doing real methods later on. So now we'll really start having some fun soon and create some real production code.